primary purpose of an equipment management system is to provide the right equipment at the right time and place at the lowest possible cost. Other purposes include minimizing equipment ownership costs, reducing downtime, and increasing utilization. An equipment management system provides tangible benefits in terms of expanded cash in the operating budget, reduced ownership costs, and more efficient execution of the work program. Reduced ownership costs accrue through better planning of fleet sizes, by extending the useful life of equipment through better maintenance, by increasing equipment availability, and by replacing equipment at the end of its economic life. Reduced operating costs occur because of proper sizing of equipment for job requirements and better purchasing practices for parts, tires, fuel, and other supplies. Reduced maintenance and repair costs occur through establishing more effective preventive maintenance programs and tailoring equipment specifications to job requirements. The potential for reducing costs through improved management is estimated at 5 to 15%. The illustration here shows the specific potential for cost savings by type. An equipment management system helps to meet your objectives by providing guidance and information in the following areas: optimization of fleet size and mix to meet user needs economically, replacement of equipment at the most economical point in its life cycle, improvement of internal management policies for more productive operations, and monitoring actual performance in relation to plans. To be effective, the system must address the following stages: authorize, purchase, deploy, use, maintain, and replace. 4 subsystems are involved: inventory planning and control, equipment maintenance, parts and supplies management, and financial management. The inventory, planning, and control subsystem contains tools that assist the equipment manager with the following functions: equipment inventory, fleet planning and authorization, equipment purchasing and replacement. The equipment maintenance subsystem has 4 components. The first is the Preventive Maintenance Program. It establishes preventive maintenance service levels, schedules, workloads, manpower, and equipment requirements. It also includes methods for program evaluation, quality control, and safety inspections. The second component is shop operations. It includes techniques for improving the daily management of the shops, such as work orders, job standards, job prioritization, job scheduling procedures, performance criteria, and evaluation of in-house versus commercial repair costs. The third component is personnel. It combines the preventive maintenance and repair workload so mechanic staffing can be projected. It also develops staffing guidelines for non-mechanic personnel. It projects needed skill requirements and training for mechanics. It evaluates work shift requirements and develops an operator and mechanic certification program. The fourth component is facilities. This element identifies required physical facilities for the shops by adopting standard shop layouts, identifying requirements for work bays and support facilities, evaluating the effectiveness of portable facilities, and establishing standard shop tool and equipment requirements. The parts and supplies subsystem involves 5 components. The first component is stock numbering and classification. It develops a parts numbering scheme. Second is stock selection and stock levels. This component establishes the most economic stock levels by evaluating in-house stock versus local purchasing. Third is inventory control. It includes procedures to ensure effective control of parts at stock locations. Fourth is inventory management. It includes procedures for automatic ordering, evaluation, and monitoring of stock. And fifth is fuel and oil management. This component provides effective fuel and oil inventory management. The last subsystem, financial management, involves 3 components. Cost accounting, which identifies and distributes all costs related to equipment. Budgeting, which establishes budgets for all operating entities. And rental rates, which ensure effective control of an equipment revolving fund by defining cost elements of ownership, developing a rental rate structure to capture total cost by equipment class, and establishing billing procedures. An effective equipment management system requires the input of a wide range of personnel. Elected representatives must be fully committed to providing the necessary backing and resources for the development and implementation of the system. The fleet manager plays a key role in any organization implementing the system, but will normally be too busy with other duties to serve as project manager for the system. But the fleet manager will have a key role in overseeing the efforts of the project manager. The fleet manager will have primary responsibility for the operation and management of the system when it is completed. The maintenance manager must provide the equipment manager with accurate and timely forecasts of equipment needs. The Director of Public Works seeks approval for the project from the governing body, approves the appointment of a project manager for development of the system, and oversees the utilization of resources. The parts manager needs to initially establish usage levels of parts and supplies, as well as reorder parts and safety stock levels. After the system is operational, this person will have to carefully monitor the parts and supplies management function. The project manager manages an in-house development team, or an outside consulting team. The accountant will be responsible for providing current and historical data on equipment ownership costs, such as depreciation, insurance, and operating maintenance costs. After the system is implemented, this data will have to be monitored to refine initial guidelines and optimize the agency's system strategy. There are a number of considerations and pitfalls that will influence the success of the system. The first is commitment and support by government officials. The development and implementation of the system requires a substantial investment of time and resources. It is not simply buying new software computer systems. Fundamental changes will need to be made in the way that equipment operations are planned, scheduled, performed, reported, and controlled. Training of staff will be required. Outside consultant assistance may be required. To obtain funding for the system, the governing body must be informed of the objectives, benefits, operational characteristics, and cost of the undertaking. Citing the successful experience of other agencies with such a system is often helpful. The second consideration is sound planning and scheduling. A work plan and schedule for system development must be adopted. Resource requirements must be estimated. Staff responsibilities must be clearly assigned. And a project manager must be appointed. Another consideration to avoid is excessive development efforts. There is no point seeking refinement beyond the realm of practical application. Attempts to define excessive numbers of activities to cover every conceivable item or conducting time and motion studies are generally unnecessary. Once the system is implemented, changes can be made as necessary. Also consider the human element. There is always resistance to change. The best way to overcome it is to keep employees informed of the objectives and benefits of the system and to involve them during system development. It is particularly useful to involve them in development of standards and optimal work methods. You should also consider coordination with other functions. The best planned systems may not be successful unless efforts are coordinated with other activities of the agency. This is especially true if several different units in the same agency use such equipment. Unless each of the units puts forth an effort to define the equipment needs well in advance of planned use and to coordinate work schedules, there will always be conflicts in equipment availability. You also need to consider automation for the system. Considering the price of computers today, most agencies can afford an automated system using a PC-based system. Automation will require suitable software and hardware. And training will also be required for all personnel involved. Proper data collection is necessary. This will require the selection of people who have the capability and training necessary for accurate and consistent data collection. Also, don't forget to involve the staff enlisting the support of employees at all levels in the development process makes for greater acceptance of end results. In this program, we have covered the basics of an equipment management system, including inventory control, fleet planning, purchasing and replacement, maintenance, parts and supplies management, financial management, and management information for timely decision-making. Each element of the equipment management system will be discussed in more detail in the 5 following videotapes on equipment management. For more information on this or other IRF videotapes, write to the International Road Federation or call the numbers on your screen. There are 3 objectives of this program. The first is to explain how to identify equipment requirements and establish an economic fleet size and mix, fleet planning. The second is to explain how to monitor the utilization and performance of the fleet, inventory control. And the third is to outline procedures that assure that each unit is replaced at its economic life point, economic replacement. This videotape covers the details you will need to provide your organization with the right equipment units at the right time at the lowest cost, and monitor the performance and cost of those units so as to schedule their replacement at the right time. There are 7 basic steps in the fleet planning process. 1. Establish assignment and utilization policies and procedures. 2. Define individual user needs. 3. Develop total equipment requirements. 4. Define and analyze alternatives. 5. Develop a comprehensive fleet plan. 6. Incorporate the fleet plan within the overall fleet budget. And 7. Obtain approval of the fleet plan and budget. First, you should develop assignment utilization procedures. They must be established prior to developing any formal fleet planning process. There are a number of procedures which can be used, such as 24-hour assignment to individuals. Generally, these assignments are made to top administrators, law enforcement personnel, or managers subject to 24-hour call, such as maintenance foremen. Also, pooling of sedan motor pools or heavy equipment motor pools can help reduce fleet sizes, but both must be effectively administered. If heavy equipment pools are used, it is a good idea to assign one operator to the same piece of equipment. Interdepartment temporary transfers can be used successfully if affected department heads fully understand the need for the program and support it. And the planned transfers are communicated to the department managers well in advance, so they know when, how much, and what type of equipment will be transferred. If trained operators are available to use and maintain the equipment, if you have an effective preventive maintenance program, and if coordination of the program and the fleet planning process is assigned to a specific individual within the department. The way in which rental rates are structured can provide an inducement to managers to transfer out equipment when it is not being used. With a two-part rate, where the user is charged an ownership rate, the user is paying for equipment which isn't needed. Temporarily transferring out the equipment would save on the budget. Leasing can be an economical alternative to owning equipment. But some agencies have procurement procedures which may make leasing difficult. It should be considered as an alternative, however. Utilization objectives must also be considered. Low utilization may indicate that a vehicle should be pooled instead of assigned to a specific department. To ensure a uniform definition of equipment service levels, definitions must be adopted or modified for the system. Some key utilization terms are typically used. Nominal availability corresponds to a calendar period or to the number of shifts normally worked in that period. Availability equals nominal availability less downtime. Utilization rate equals time in use divided by available time. Time in use includes transport time as well as time in use on site. Utilization standards must be flexible to accommodate different needs. For example, pickups used by complaints investigators may have very high mileage. Pickups used by maintenance personnel may have moderate mileage. And utility inspectors may log very low mileage as they generally travel to one job site and remain there all day. Although their mileage is low, time in use is high. Some recommended guidelines are shown here. However, each agency needs to develop its own utilization rates based on its specific needs. You should also develop downtime objectives. The objectives shown here represent an average, well-managed fleet. You should also define individual user needs. The user should communicate needs in a specific, uniform format as shown here. Next, the fleet manager must analyze user requirements separately and in total to optimize fleet size. The requirements must be summarized by equipment class, as shown here. After needs have been identified, the fleet manager must determine alternatives for meeting user needs. There are 4 possible alternatives to meet peak user needs. Fleet pooling, which is most effective for sedans, temporary transfers. Generally, heavy equipment falls into this category. Leasing or renting is particularly effective for specialized, high-cost equipment with low utilization, such as gradals. And buying new equipment and expanding the fleet. It may be cheaper to own the equipment. This option must be analyzed too. The fleet plan should cover assignment policies, number of units, and other key data. Incorporate the plan into the budget process using utilization policies, user requirements, total fleet requirements, analysis of alternatives, a comprehensive plan, and incorporation of the plan into the budget. Next, you need to consider the equipment inventory. The equipment inventory component is made up of 4 elements: equipment numbering and classification, an equipment master file, location and assignment tracking, and utilization and performance monitoring. With a proper equipment numbering classification system, each piece of equipment should possess a unique number that remains the same throughout its life. Each unit should also be assigned to an equipment class for planning purposes and for comparing its performance with similar units in the fleet. The American Public Works Association, APWA, has developed an alphanumeric coding structure, as shown here. Another good system is to develop a 6- or 7-digit number, depending on your fleet size, that incorporates a class code along with a unique number, as shown here. The class code should be established as a hierarchical number that can be used to classify and subclassify equipment types. Consider the example shown here. Regardless of whether you have an automated or manual system, a complete master file should be maintained. The file should consist of 2 parts: a master record and history files. And don't forget to keep a backup file. A history jacket should be established for each equipment unit that contains all pertinent information about the unit. The jacket should contain the birth certificate, work orders, accident records, and other pertinent information. In designing an equipment tracking system, there are a number of guidelines to follow. The tracking system should function simply as a tracking system. Do not try to mix it with utilization or performance monitoring. These are handled better in other components of the system. Maintain the inventory files for primary assignments of equipment units. Establish a policy of updating the files only for long-term assignments. For example, in excess of 1 month. Do not try to be too specific. It's very difficult to try to maintain equipment inventories down to specific maintenance crews, for example. Generally, inventories at the department level are sufficient. Establish an equipment location board for individual departments to use. they can track equipment location, and the board is helpful for them in maintaining visibility of their total inventory. A magnetic board is good for this. The replacement component of a system is usually the last component to be implemented, since it requires detailed cost data. It is comprised of 4 main elements: replacement targets, physical evaluations, the decision-making process, and the capital replacement plan. Each of the above system elements requires a 6-step planning process. Step 1. Identify units targeted for replacement using industry norms. Step 2. Obtain replacement requests from users, submitted in priority order. Step 3. Perform physical inspection to determine whether the unit will remain in service or be replaced. Step 4. Evaluate alternatives. Leave the unit in the fleet, replace it, or overhaul the unit. Step 5. Prioritize replacement units. In case the budget does not allow replacement of all units, the top priorities can be chosen. And Step 6. Develop a total capital replacement plan, which should become a part of the overall annual fleet plan and budget. In this course, we've covered fleet planning, inventory control, and economic replacement. In the next series of courses, we will cover other components of an equipment management system. For more information on this or other IRF videotapes, write to the International Road Federation or call the numbers on your screen. The objectives of equipment maintenance are to give fleet managers the tools that will help them minimize maintenance and repair costs. Explain how these tools can be used most effectively, and guide managers in developing the equipment maintenance subsystem of the equipment management system. The equipment maintenance subsystem results in improved maintenance programs, increased shop efficiency, better staffing, and better definition of facilities needs. 3 components make up this subsystem: the Preventive Maintenance, or PM program, shop operations, and facilities. PM is periodically scheduled services and inspections aimed at preventing potential breakdowns, maintaining the equipment in safe and efficient operating condition, and detecting the needs for major repairs. Necessary repairs discovered during PMs are not part of the PM program. They should be scheduled for repair at an appropriate time. An effective preventive maintenance program can do more for minimizing overall maintenance and repair costs than any other element of equipment management. Design of a good PM program and its implementation deserves the highest management attention to assure that the best possible program is developed and carried out. A good PM program should consist of the following 4 parts: PM service intervals, PM service standards, long-range PM schedules, and schedule compliance and control procedures. Part 1 of the PM program is PM service intervals. PM service intervals can be established on the basis of time, daily or monthly, and usage, miles or hours. This graph shows that a low level of PM will result in high repair costs and high total cost. As the level of effort for PM is increased, repair and total costs decrease. There is a point, however, at which additional increases in PM effort have little effect on repair cost. After this point, the total cost will increase because of the high cost of PM. The ideal level of PM is the point at which total cost is minimized. The best starting point for establishing PM service intervals is the manufacturer's recommendations. Dusty conditions, off-road usage, road condition, towing and stop-and-go versus long-haul operations affect the amount of PM needed. The factors that affect PM in each particular case must be identified before establishing service intervals. The service intervals must be set on a general equipment class level. For example, there may be a number of individual classes of sedans, but except for police vehicles, PM requirements will normally be the same. Intervals should be set for time and mile-hour usage. The next component of a good PM program is PM service standards. Part 2. In conjunction with setting service intervals, the type of service and inspection to be performed at each interval must also be established. It is best to designate the type of services by a code, such as PM A, B, or C, or PM 1, 2, or 3. The particular method selected is not important, but it is important to have the specific services designated. In this way, when a specific unit is due for a PMB service, the mechanic will know specifically what services and inspection are to be performed. While the PM intervals can be established by general class, PM service standards need to be established down to the specific class, particularly for heavy equipment. PM standards are comprised of 4 parts. The individual responsible for performing the PM service, the estimated hours for performing the service, a detailed checklist of inspections or services to be performed, and a list of parts needed. Part 3 of the PM program is the PM schedule. The exact format will depend on whether the system is automated or manual. The PM plan projects the total workload of PMs, the estimated mechanic hours, and the number of mechanics needed to carry out the work. Projecting the PM staffing needs will help schedule the work and will be integrated into overall staffing procedures. After the plan is developed, the work must be distributed by month or week in an attempt to level the workload. Specific dates for PM services for each vehicle need to be established. Part 4 of the PM program is schedule compliance and control procedures. Unless an automated system can be designed so that vehicle utilization is captured and updated weekly, a manual system can be just as effective as an automated one. Shop operations is the next major phase. It is broken down into several key steps, including shop planning, organizing and staffing, scheduling, and monitoring and control. First, let's cover shop planning. A maintenance program starts with planning, which means defining the shop's workload and projecting the resources and budget required to accomplish it. The first step is to determine exactly what responsibilities each shop will have. Some satellite shops may only be responsible for PMs and minor repairs, while the central shop is responsible for major repairs and overhauls. Some shops may be specialty shops. For example, where there is sufficient workload, a 1- or 2-man shop may be established for repair of mowers at a remote substation. Once shop responsibilities are defined, planning can be done for that shop. There are 2 methods of defining shop workloads and staffing: vehicles per mechanic ratio, vehicle equivalency, and maintenance labor hour planning standards. The vehicles per mechanic ratio method of projecting shop staffing is very simplified, but it offers some measure of planning. In this method, a ratio of vehicles that can be maintained per mechanic is developed and applied to each shop. The advantage of the vehicle per mechanic method is its simplicity. The disadvantage is that it does not allow for consideration of the mix of equipment. It obviously takes fewer mechanics to maintain 20 cars than 20 dump trucks. To design a planning system using the vehicles per mechanic method, a standard ratio should be developed considering fleet makeup, utilization, type of use, and climate. The vehicle equivalency method is promoted by the American Public Works Association. The basis of this method is to determine the average number of man-hours required to maintain one base equivalent vehicle in a year. Each agency should determine which vehicle they will use as the base vehicle. A general use auto is best. The hours necessary to maintain the base equivalent unit require the development of performance standards for repair activities by equipment class. Using the standards and historical frequencies for the repair activities, a key volume indicator, KVI, can be developed for each class of vehicle. The KVI is a measure of hours required to maintain a vehicle at a given utilization for the year. Here is an example of how the KVI for a general use automobile is calculated. The KVIs are then equated to equivalency units for each class. The equivalency unit is the ratio of each class to the base class. Suppose the KVI for dump trucks was 164.5 labor hours. Then the equivalency unit, EU, would be computed as follows. The EU is equal to the KVI for the class, 164.5, divided by the KVI for the base class, 20.46, which equals 8. Therefore, maintaining a dump truck for a year is equivalent to maintaining 8 general use autos. In addition to the equivalency units, the number of available hours for each mechanic must be estimated. This example illustrates how they can be computed. The numbers shown here are for illustration. Each agency should develop its own. Once available hours are computed and equivalency units determined for each equipment class, manpower needs are easily computed for the shops as shown here. The second element in the management cycle is staffing. This function is performed immediately after development of the work program and generally involves distributing the workload throughout the year, determining skill requirements, planning staffing patterns to meet workload and skill requirements, and implementing procedures to meet peak workloads. Distributing the workload over the months of the year is done to identify staffing needs for each month. The workload includes 3 broad categories of work: preventive maintenance, repair, and rebuild overhaul. Distributing the PM workload is done through development of the 52-week schedule discussed earlier. Properly developed, the schedule should provide a generally level distribution of the workload. Distributing the repair workload is best done from historical data. It is impossible to predict the daily repair workload. The rebuild workload for each agency depends on the agency's policies and in-house capabilities. Some agencies have found it cheaper to contract for rebuilding. Some have not developed rebuild programs because they do not have in-house personnel skills or because facilities are not adequate. Distributing the rebuild or overhaul workloads of the shops allows the manager some flexibility. In sections which have distinct summer and winter seasons, the shop's repair workload may be much heavier in one or the other. Rebuilds, then, should be scheduled when the workload is light. Once the workload is distributed, staffing needs by skill level can be determined. This is done by looking at the workload each month to define the type of work to be done. Referring to the table here, for example, Assume that 250 hours of PM work are needed in November. The staffing need is 1.9 mechanics as shown. The same determination is made for each month. For PM, the variation should be small from month to month, so that about 2 mechanics will be needed to handle the workload. What skills are needed? Often, someone who is inexperienced is placed on PM work. However, it should be just the opposite. The purpose of PM is to service the vehicle and to diagnose potential breakdowns. The skills required for PM work are experience and well-rounded mechanical knowledge. Just as important is the attitude toward the PM. The next step is to determine how they can be provided most effectively. How can total staffing fluctuate from a low demand of 10.9 in February to a high of 15.4 in June? After analyzing total staffing needs for all work, the fleet manager must define exactly when peak needs arise. Then he must define what alternatives are available to meet those needs. Obviously, overtime is an alternative for meeting some of the peak demands. Overtime should be evaluated in terms of each agency's policy on overtime, effect on worker productivity, effect on worker morale, and effect on quality of work. The third element of the management cycle is scheduling. To this point, a shop plan has been developed and an organization put together. Now, the manager must direct and schedule the work as it occurs. Scheduling is short-range planning. It is determining the immediate shop workload and scheduling available resources so downtime is minimized. Scheduling is often the most neglected management function in a shop operation. This is primarily because it requires constant effort and attention. It is basically a manual operation, and there is a tendency to say it isn't worth the effort because schedules must be updated daily or even hourly. It is impossible to predict exactly when a breakdown will occur, but historical trends on a fleet-wide basis can provide good indicators of what can be anticipated. That is what shop scheduling is all about: planning, anticipating, and estimating the short-range workload. Actually, with an effective PM program and scheduling system, scheduled repairs should make up the majority of the workload. PM services alone should account for 30% of the shop work. At least 50% of the repair work and 100% of the rebuild work should be scheduled. In total, scheduled work should be nearly 70% of all work performed. Establishing a priority system can help the shop superintendent focus shop resources on jobs that have the greatest need and the greatest impact on overall equipment service levels. There are a number of factors that enter into priority decisions: safety, effect of downtime on user operations, and capability of equipment to perform. Shop schedules should be developed weekly It is best to develop the schedule on Thursdays, so arrangements for parts and coordination with users can take place on Friday. The fourth element of the management cycle is monitoring and control. The element involves reporting, monitoring shop performance, and controlling costs by improving efficiency and quality. The primary reporting document for shop operations is the shop work order. As pointed out earlier, the work order should be a multi-purpose form, one of which is to capture information on equipment downtime and repair labor hours and cost. Good management dictates that operations be monitored, and an equipment shop is no exception. As information needs are defined, a determination has to be made on how shop performance is to be monitored. A list of key performance indicators should be developed. Look at job repeats, rejections, and repair trends by type of work. This is quality control. Under the area of productivity, look at repair costs and percentage of hours charged to specific types of repairs. To evaluate the PM program, look at the ratio of PM hours to repair hours, the percent of PMs done on schedule, and the number of road calls. And for overall effectiveness, look at the ratio of scheduled to unscheduled repairs, equipment downtime trends, and equipment cost per mile or per hour. Work control is not totally an after-the-fact management action. It starts long before the work actually begins. Effective control is exercised through planning, staffing, and scheduling. Many of the management techniques that have been discussed here will help affect good work control. In this program, we have discussed the equipment maintenance subsystem. Using it effectively results in improved maintenance programs, increased shop efficiency, better staffing, and better definition of facilities needs. For more information on this or other IRF videotapes, write to the International Road Federation or call the numbers on your screen. One key objective of parts and supplies management is to minimize equipment downtime. If spare parts and supplies are not readily available, costly delays can result. In fact, non-availability of parts is the primary cause of in-shop equipment downtime. Another objective is to avoid unnecessarily large inventories, which are also costly. Although better prices can be obtained by large quantity purchases, there are costs associated with storage and handling. The cost of maintaining parts stocks can add 50% or more to the cost of parts. The two objectives, to minimize downtime and inventory costs, are obviously in conflict. The challenge of parts and supplies management is to balance downtime and inventory costs. There are four major elements of the parts and supply management system: stock numbering and classification, stock selection and stock levels, inventory management, and fuel management. Stock numbering schemes should facilitate identification and location of parts, to expedite equipment repair, and allow effective inventory control. In most cases, the part numbering schemes used by equipment and parts manufacturers are not compatible nor convenient for storage and retrieval in a typical stockroom environment. The Complete Standard Parts Identification System, SPIS, is composed of 4 sub-elements plus the manufacturer's part code. They include the component code, 8 digits, manufacturer's ID code, 5 digits, product condition code, 1 digit, fleet code, 3 digits, and the manufacturer's part code varies. The component code consists of an 8-digit code with 3 sub-elements: major group system, 2 digits, assembly, 3 digits, and parts, 3 digits. The first digit of the major group system code identifies the major group of vehicle components, as shown here. The second digit in the group system code identifies the operating system within the major group. The assembly code identifies parts assemblies within a group system. For example, assembly code 003 is a fan assembly. The part code is a 3-digit code which identifies a specific part in the assembly. For example, in the fan assembly, part code 010 is a fan belt. The meaning of this code also varies with the type of assembly. The manufacturer's ID code consists of 5 letters. A large list of manufacturers' codes is provided in the ATA manual, but additional ones may be added. The ATA code for a Cummins diesel, for example, is CMMNS. The product condition code is a 1-digit numerical code used to identify a component as new, used, or rebuilt. For example, 1 is new, 2 is rebuilt, and 3 is used. The fleet code is a 3-digit numerical code for those agencies that maintain several fleets, or have portions of their fleets assigned to different geographic locations, or wish to identify several classes of equipment. The manufacturer's part code can be used to identify the manufacturer's part number or a user-assigned number. Manufacturer's part numbers are variable in length. and can be both alphabetical and numerical. Here is an example of a complete code for a typical part. It includes major group, power plant, cylinder block, main bearing, manufacturer, condition, fleet, and part number. Stock classification systems are developed to aid in inventory management. Some parts are relatively easy to obtain at reasonable prices and are not stocked in large quantities. Others may be used so infrequently that the cost of stocking them cannot be justified. Some require long lead times and cannot be obtained easily. Some are critical because the downtime cost while waiting for the part to arrive would be prohibitive. A useful stock classification scheme typically includes 4 types. Regular stock, which includes parts with relatively high usage and fast turnover. Seasonal stock, that varies with the season. Critical stock, which includes parts that are critically important to the operation. And trial stock, including parts placed in inventory on a trial basis to determine proper stocking levels. What is the proper stock to select, and at what level should it be maintained? A general answer is not possible. Equipment types and usage vary widely from one agency to another, as do sources of supply and purchasing practices. Several considerations influence whether a part's inventory should be maintained in-house or not. A good starting point is to consider the no inventory situation. What would be the consequences of buying each item locally as needed? If there is a local supplier, and if the agency has a history on parts usage, the cost of having someone chase each part can be determined and added to the additional down cost incurred while waiting for the part. As the number of parts stocked increases, the storage costs increase. More shelves or another room may have to be added. As the inventory grows, how can one be sure that the part needed is still in storage? These considerations indicate the need for record keeping and inventory control. If the parts purchases amount to large quantities, better prices may be obtained from non-local distributors. However, quantity discounts from remote sources must be weighed against the cost of ordering, such as phone calls and shipping. The point at which an order should be placed is called the reorder point, ROP. This is the level of stock which is sufficient to meet demand while replacements are ordered and received, plus a safety margin or buffer. The ROP depends upon the usage rate and the vendor lead time. The formula for computing the ROP is ROP equals U times L plus S, where U equals average number of parts used monthly, L equals average vendor lead time in months, and S equals safety stock level. The ROP is normally calculated after there is sufficient historical usage data. Initially, however, a reasonable estimate will have to be made based on experience. The safety stock level is the number of parts that should always be on hand in case of unforeseen circumstances. The level may vary with different classes of parts and rates of usage. The number of parts which should be ordered when the ROP is reached is called the reorder quantity, ROQ. A formula is used to calculate the ROQ. ROQ equals the square root of 2 times C times U divided by I times P, where C equals cost of placing a single order, U equals average monthly usage, P equals unit cost of part, and I equals inventory carrying cost per month per dollar of average inventory. The inventory carrying cost, I, is determined by adding the total monthly cost of keeping an inventory. The costs may include utilities, building space, equipment depreciation, obsolete parts, computer costs, and current expenses. Then I can be computed as follows. Total inventory cost per month divided by average dollar value of inventory. The ROQ is normally calculated after sufficient historical data has been developed, but initially an estimate will have to be made based on estimates of cost and usage. The next key phase is parts and materials inventory management. This requires careful upfront planning. Effective inventory management ensures that inventory levels are kept at the most economical point. The key components of an inventory management system are parts master file, parts ordering, parts control, stock on order control, and inventory evaluation. The parts master file is the principal source of information about all parts stocked. The parts master record stock status report must be updated for each occurrence of any one of the following events: completion of initial inventory, receipt of new stock items, issuance of parts from stock or return of unused parts to stock, disposal of obsolete parts, and change in price or change in reorder point, reorder quantity, or safety stock level. The parts master file is updated as each change occurs, but revised reports are normally issued once a month. As parts are issued from stock, the parts master file must be updated. When the quantity of parts on hand reaches the ROP, a low stock notice should be prepared. Each time a part is issued from stock, when the level is at or below the ROP, another low stock notice should be issued. The low stock notice should indicate usage for the last 12 months. To avoid a buildup of obsolete parts, a procedure must be established to detect inactive stock. At least 4 times a year, every part in the parts master file should be compared to the low stock notice reports. When older equipment is sold or disposed of, any parts associated with it should also be disposed of, unless the parts are interchangeable with other equipment still in use. To To ensure that the parts manager is constantly aware of outstanding orders, a stock on order file should be maintained. As each order is placed, the order should be recorded in the stock on order file. As each order is received, it should be noted in the stock on order file. Periodically, the parts manager should review and evaluate inventory policies and procedures. This should include a review of items stocked, usage rates, and turnover to determine if the items still warrant stocking. A review of ROP, ROQ, and safety stock level. And a review of usage of non-stock forms. Inventory control, as opposed to inventory management, deals with the physical aspects of handling the inventory. Purchasing, pricing, charge-out procedures, record keeping, and security. Parts may be purchased by two methods: requisitions and purchase orders, and field purchases. A purchase order is the normal method and should follow the agency's standard procedures. Field purchases are made when a part is needed that is not in stock. These are normally small items needed to expedite repairs. They are handled on a cash basis. As parts are received and added to the inventory, the parts master file should be updated by the parts manager. The cost of parts is assigned to the appropriate job and piece of equipment by entering the cost on the work order. The usual practice is to establish an average price for each part. The average pricing method combines the unit cost of new parts coming into inventory with the cost of parts already on hand. Another key component is fuel management. Many of the concepts and techniques used for spare parts management are also applied to fuel management. The main differences are the need for separate storage and handling facilities, and for better control methods. The key aspects of fuel management are size and location of distribution facilities, standardized purchasing procedures, monitoring fuel usage, security, and automated fuel systems. By considering monthly fuel usage and using the ROP, ROQ, and safety stock procedures discussed earlier in this chapter, the size of fuel storage tanks can be determined. Location of the tanks requires some additional analysis. For small, centrally located equipment fleets, a central fuel storage facility is appropriate. In addition, one or more mobile refueling facilities may be necessary to reduce unproductive travel time from work sites. A purchasing agreement should be negotiated with a fuel distributor based on price and delivery considerations. Specifications and annual usage estimates should be established for the various fuel grades required. Fuel delivery tickets should be verified by occasionally spot-checking tanker truck gauge readings before and after delivery, or by stick readings at the tank before and after delivery. As fuel is used, basic information about the transaction should be recorded. The quantity and type of fuel, pump number, and date should be recorded along with the employee's ID, equipment number, and odometer or hour meter reading. Several security measures are commonly used. The first and oldest is to padlock the fuel pumps and issue keys to only those who are authorized to use fuel. There are a number of commercially available automated fuel systems. While specific designs vary, most will provide automated accounting of fuel usage. With automated systems, it is a relatively simple matter to monitor fuel and oil usage by piece of equipment. When usage levels exceed normal ranges, the need for PM work may be indicated. High usage should be a flag for further investigation to determine the cause and correct it. In this course, we've covered the basics of the Parts and Supplies Management System, including stock numbering and classification, stock selection and levels, parts and supplies inventory management, and fuel management. For more information on this or other IRF videotapes, write to the International Road Federation or call the numbers on your screen. The fourth subsystem of the equipment management system is financial management. This subsystem deals with cost accounting, budget, equipment rental rates, and equipment funds. These four elements are essential for developing a financial management system. Many equipment decisions must be supported by sound cost information. Most agencies will already have in place accounting and budgeting procedures. Many will also have a form of equipment rental or chargeback. Dealing with the design of the EMS in these areas requires coordination and communication with those agency divisions with accounting and budgeting responsibilities. Cost accounting is the systematic process of defining equipment expenses and distributing them to the specific equipment cost elements. Any financial management accounting system needs to serve a twofold purpose: financial accounting and operational control. In designing the cost accounting system, the objective should be to give managers a picture of operating costs that relate specifically to their responsibilities and decisions. Costs to be tracked in the cost accounting system should be tailored to line managers' functional responsibilities and be consistent with factors that have a significant effect on desired operating objectives. Several key cost classifications should be incorporated into an equipment cost accounting system. The first classification is maintenance repair. This would include direct labor and parts charged directly to equipment units, direct charges, and significant volumes of indirect costs, such as miscellaneous parts and shop overhead. Fuel and lubricants. Fuel costs should include all consumable operating supplies and the costs of distributing them. Parts distribution costs. These include all costs of maintaining and operating parts storerooms and shops. Miscellaneous parts costs. Miscellaneous parts costs include the price of all common, high-use, low-unit cost items placed in shop bins for uncontrolled access. Shop overhead costs. Shop overhead costs should include all non-direct charges connected with the supervision, operation, and maintenance of central and field repair shops. General management and administration costs. These costs are incurred to support the planning, funding, operation, and maintenance of the equipment fleet. Non-operational costs. Non-operational costs include equipment depreciation and capitalized equipment betterment or rebuild costs. Equipment depreciation would be charged to equipment units on the basis of charges from equipment asset accounts. The final key element of the cost accounting system is a systematic mechanism for allocating indirect costs to specific units or classes of equipment. In the foregoing structure of equipment-related costs, indirect costs are those that would not be charged directly to individual units of equipment. As with cost accounting, the agency will probably have some type of formalized budgeting procedures in place. The objective should be to develop budgeting procedures that support and enhance the existing system. Budgeting is much like planning. There will be considerable overlap between the budgeting system and planning. To the extent possible, budgets should be performance-based and keyed to the level of fleet size, availability objective, and projected utilization. The first step in designing the budgeting system is to determine responsibility. These responsibility centers generally should correspond to the major equipment management functions. The budget system should incorporate a standard development process for each program and include the following 5 steps. Step 1. Establish goals and objectives. To the extent possible, the goals and objectives should be quantifiable and form a basis for defining the workload and for measuring performance. Some specific objectives might include maximum allowable downtime, replacing all vehicles meeting replacement criteria, and achieving average utilization rates by class. Step 2 is to define strategies. Once the goals and objectives are established, strategies for meeting them must be defined. For example, suppose the fleet manager has established an objective of reducing downtime for dump trucks from 12% to 10%. a strategy must be formed. Perhaps it can be met with more training, more use of commercial repair shops, shifting alternatives so that PMs or other types of work are performed on night shifts, thus increasing the time that the vehicle is available to the user. Increased staffing and operator training. Step 3 is to establish budget guidelines. Standardized budget development and procedures should be established for preparing and submitting the budget. Step 4 is budget review and approval. The size of the organization and the organizational structure will dictate the steps of the review and approval process. The fleet manager should be involved in the development of the budget from the beginning, so that a formal approval checkoff is not needed. Step 5 is budget implementation. The final step of the budget development process is implementation. This may involve including the performance-based equipment budget into the overall agency budget. The last element of the budget system is cost control. The primary reason for developing performance budgets is to improve cost control. Line managers, such as the shop supervisor and parts manager, must be closely involved in preparing the budgets. Cost reports showing levels of cost actually incurred against costs budgeted should be prepared regularly and distributed to the managers directly responsible for the area budgeted. Operating budget and cost performance reports should show actual and budgeted costs for the past period and year to date. The report entries of primary importance are year-to-date budgeted and actual costs, since it is this data that normally provide the clearest picture of significant cost trends. Equipment rental rates provide the means to view the total costs of owning the equipment. Showing costs to users in this manner also has the effect of pricing equipment availability and usage. There are a number of alternatives for developing a system of rental rates. The most effective is a two-part rate comprised of ownership rate and operating rate. A rental rate should be established for each class of equipment. Some equipment, such as air compressors and trailers, would have only an ownership rate, since there is no way of measuring usage. Another method of establishing rental rates is to have a single rate that reflects all the costs. While many agencies use this approach, it is not as accurate because usage, and therefore usage-related costs, can vary during the year. Updated rental rates should be developed each year prior to the budgeting cycle for use by agencies in developing their budgets. It is never possible to project precisely the rental rates, especially during high inflationary periods. Although relatively steady now, fuel costs have been extremely volatile. Once rental rates are established, user agencies are charged monthly on the basis of the equipment units they use. The ownership rate would be a flat monthly charge for each equipment unit, regardless of usage. The primary purpose of an equipment fund is to provide the fleet manager with the funds necessary to replace equipment when it is most economical. In turn, this difficulty results in the expenditure of a proportionately greater amount of operating funds to maintain overaged equipment. It also results in reduced equipment reliability. Replacing equipment when it is most economical implies the development of a planned, well-administered turnover that will be relatively consistent from one year to another. An equipment fund guarantees the availability of funds to carry out such a program. Under the Equipment Replacement Fund concept, all replacement costs would be recovered from equipment users through the rental rate system. Using rental rates to recover these costs involves transferring funds from user budgets to an equipment fund reserve account. Depreciation would thus be treated as a cash expenditure for the user, and the cash flow resulting from depreciation charges would be set aside for the eventual purchase of replacement equipment. Funds credited to the equipment fund should not be required to be spent in their entirety by the end of the budget period. This would defeat much of the fund's purpose in giving the fleet manager the flexibility to time purchases with manufacturing cycles. If an equipment fund is properly managed, it should, on average, have a continual balance equal at least to the straight-line annual depreciation value of the entire complement. Monies set aside in the fund would be drawn on to fund the purchase of new equipment as equipment reaches an optimum replacement age and as procurements are scheduled to meet these needs. The use of an equipment fund should result in equipment that is turned over at a planned, controlled rate on the basis of ownership and maintenance economies. In turn, equipment should be reduced in age and increased in reliability in many places, and the total expenditure of operating and capital funds should be controlled more effectively. In this course, we have covered the basics of the financial management subsystem. We dealt with cost accounting, budgeting, equipment rental rates, and equipment funds. Cost accounting is the systematic process of defining equipment expenses and distributing them to specific equipment cost elements. The key cost classifications in a good cost accounting system include maintenance repair, fuels and lubricants, parts distribution costs, miscellaneous parts costs, shop overhead costs, general management and administration costs, and non-operational costs. Budgeting is much like planning. To the extent possible, budgets should be performance-based and kept to the level of fleet size, availability objective, and projected utilization. Equipment rental rates provide the means to view total costs of owning equipment. Showing costs to users in this manner also has the effect of pricing equipment availability and usage. Equipment funds provide fleet managers with the funds necessary to replace equipment when it is most economical. Replacement costs are recovered from equipment users through the rental rate system. For more information on this or other IRF videotapes, write to the International Road Federation or call the numbers on your screen. An Equipment Management Information Subsystem, EMIS, is somewhat different from the other EMS subsystems. An EMIS is not a standalone system, but rather an integration of all the other EMS subsystems. The objective of the EMIS is to provide management information from the EMS for effective, timely, and efficient decision-making. The EMIS is not a panacea. It is a tool for managers to plan, schedule, monitor, evaluate, and control equipment operations. The EMS should provide for identification of all output reports and input data from the various EMS subsystems. The EMIS is an integrated, relational database with report-generating capabilities. For normal operation, data is collected and entered through the individual EMS subsystems and is stored in the database. The basic input data is processed in several ways and may be shared by several subsystems. The processed data is summarized in various standardized output reports. There are several advantages in designing a system around a relational database. First, there are a number of commercial database management systems available. Second, as user needs change, the system can be readily modified to allow for new input data and output reports with relatively minor effort. Most database management systems have a built-in report generation capability. This feature allows the user to define the output formats of reports tailored to suit their needs, using any combination of data elements contained in the database. In typical EMS installations, a number of pre-designed output reports will be supplied with the initial setup. However, user needs change from time to time, and the standard reports may need to be modified. EMS installations can be found on computer systems from the smallest microcomputers to the largest mainframes. The size of the fleet will be the major determining factor. Two determining factors for the type and size of computer are storage capacity and processing speed. Storage capacity can be estimated by identifying the amount of equipment and the number of data elements required for each piece. An estimate of file size can be made by adding up the field sizes, or width, of each item. Approximately 1 byte of computer storage is required for each alphabetic character, and approximately 7 bytes are required for each numeric field. The calculated file size should be increased by about 30% to allow for indexing of files in the database. Then, the estimated storage requirements should be tripled to allow for future growth, file manipulations, and EMIS and other software storage. To be useful, management information must be timely. Weekly reports must be produced within 1 day after weekly data entry, and monthly reports within about 3 days after monthly data entry. Another hardware consideration is the number of entry points into the EMIS. That is, the number of terminals that will be required for data entry. In a centralized small agency, a standalone system with 1 terminal will normally suffice. If the data entry point is separated from the area where inquiries will be made, or if there are several equipment yards and shops, then more than 1 terminal may be required. This is known as a multi-user environment. With this arrangement, data can be entered at the remote site in a standalone mode and, when convenient, uploaded to the central computer for processing. The remote would also have access to selected files on the central computer. Specific details will vary with individual needs and types of installation, but the overall structure outlined here will generally meet typical agency needs. The diagram shown here provides an overview of the EMIS. The database required for an effective EMIS should contain the following types of files: Equipment Inventory Master File, Parts and Supplies Master File, Shop Personnel Master File, Work Order File, Performance Standards Files, Annual Work Program File, Work Accomplishment and Expenditure File, Equipment Maintenance, Equipment Utilization File, Shop Labor Unit Cost File, and Purchase Order Status File. Successful implementation of the equipment management system will require careful planning and scheduling. There are some general considerations that have been derived from experience in a wide range of agencies. Although these will not guarantee success, they can facilitate the implementation process. These implementation considerations include commitment to the concept by top management, clear understanding and communication of the basic objectives of equipment management, and involvement of all levels of the organization in each step of the system development process. A sound system design tailored to the needs and circumstances of the agency, including realistic implementation plan and schedule, expert guidance and assistance, orientation, documentation, and training, and system monitoring and improvement. No major development effort can succeed without a firm commitment by top management. This means commitment of sufficient funds, resources, and time. Involvement by managers at all levels is necessary to ensure commitment to basic objectives of the system and commitment of personnel needed. The task of developing and implementing an EMS is a major undertaking. A project manager with an understanding of systems analysis concepts should be assigned on a full-time basis. Generally, the equipment manager has too many demands on his time to effectively fill this role. Other commitments of support must be made from time to time. Every manager involved with equipment as a user should be involved occasionally, even if only in a review capacity. The system design presented here is a general design that has evolved from experience with a large number of agencies. It is generally applicable to all types of equipment operations, but is aimed primarily at equipment used for road and street maintenance. However, implementation requires some tailoring to develop performance standards, quantity standards, and management reports that are applicable in a specific situation. Many agencies have found that assistance from consultants experienced in equipment management can help. Comprehensive equipment management systems are relatively new, and information on the subject is limited. Although outside assistance will substantially reduce time commitments by the agency's staff, there will still be need for involvement from time to time. Even with most of the development and implementation work provided by contract, the agency should assign a project coordinator to work with the consultant. This will ensure that the agency is thoroughly familiar with the product and will be able to carry it forward and make future revisions. Agency personnel should be oriented on the new system early in the development process. Thorough understandings of the system and individual responsibilities are essential to smooth implementation. The EMS should be thoroughly documented for both the operators and users of the system. If the system is automated, the procedures for data entry and operation of the computer system should be documented. Some agencies have found that 2 separate manuals are desirable. An equipment management system manual that describes all aspects of the system is usually provided for office personnel who operate and maintain the EMS. A user's manual is normally provided for equipment personnel, which contains descriptions of authorized work activities, performance standards, scheduling and reporting forms, and related instructions. An important question will need to be addressed early in the development process. Should a customized software package be developed? Or should one or several commercially available systems be acquired? The cost of developing customized software will generally be more than the cost of commercially available software. The advantage is having a package exactly suited to the agency's needs. The commercially available packages should be reviewed carefully to ensure that all requirements of the EMS are met. Some packages provide inventory control. Others aid in scheduling. Some are geared to tracking work orders. A few provide for the entire management cycle. Some firms offer comprehensive software packages as part of their services, but do not sell the software separately. This is because installation of the software package by itself does not constitute an EMS. Without making the necessary improvements in the way that work is planned, budgeted, scheduled, reported, and controlled, no improvement in equipment operations will be realized. After implementation, operations should be monitored carefully to ensure that all elements are working as intended and that personnel are using the system properly. In some cases, subtle bugs may show up after a period of operation, in spite of thorough testing. Sometimes, operator error causes the system to perform unexpectedly. In any case, a prudent manager will monitor results carefully, especially during the first few months of operation. Another reason for carefully monitoring results is to take advantage of the new information that is now available to managers. The need for monitoring never really ends, even after the initial first-year adjustments. The EMS provides a framework in which changes can be readily evaluated and adopted. An undertaking of this magnitude must be carefully planned and scheduled to ensure orderly and effective development. Also, resource requirements must be clearly identified and allocated. Generally, one of two approaches has been followed: development of the entire system and implementation of all elements simultaneously, or development and implementation of one element at a time. In either case, most public works agencies can usually complete the development and implementation process in about 12 months. An additional 12 months is usually required to monitor operations and make refinements to the system. At the end of the first full year of operation, performance and quantity standards can be reviewed and revised if necessary. At that point, additional training can be provided to overcome any remaining problem areas. The work is typically accomplished in 3 phases. Phase 1, preparations. Phase 2, system design. And Phase 3, implementation. Phase 1, preparation, consists of several preparatory tasks. Task 1 is conduct of preliminary work. This task is intended to clarify the agency's objectives for the tasks ahead. A basic policy statement on equipment management should be developed and adopted, indicating a commitment on the part of top officials to improve the equipment operations. An assessment of the agency's needs should be made. Fulfillment of these needs will be an important consideration in selecting or adapting a system conceptual design in the next 2 tasks. A project manager should be assigned. This assignment will involve substantial amounts of time, perhaps half-time or full-time for about 12 months, depending on design and implementation arrangements. Task 2 involves review of alternatives for system development. There are several courses of action to be considered in developing an EMS. First, the conceptual design presented here may be used to guide development and implementation. Or, a commercially available EMS package may meet the agency's requirements. Task 3 involves selecting a course of action and obtaining approval. After considering the alternatives, the project manager and equipment manager should recommend a course of action and seek required approvals. Task 4 involves developing a detailed work plan, schedule, and cost estimate. Phase 2 consists of all tasks related to development of a detailed design for an EMS prior to implementation. Task 5 involves developing an equipment inventory and planning and control subsystem. This includes development of equipment classification and numbering schemes, development of equipment inventory forms and procedures, development of fleet sizing and authorization procedures, and development of equipment replacement strategies and procedures. Task 6 involves developing an equipment maintenance management subsystem. This task includes detailed design of all procedures related to preventive maintenance and shop operations. A preventive maintenance (PM) program should be developed, consisting of PM schedules and reporting procedures, PM workload and manpower requirements, and PM quality control procedures. Task 7 involves developing a parts and supplies management subsystem. Procedures for managing the parts and supplies inventory will be developed under this task. The main activities involved are development of a stock numbering and classification scheme and development of stocking procedures. Task 8 involves developing a financial management subsystem. The main elements of this task are development of procedures to ensure equipment-related costs, development of rental rate procedures, and coordination with the accounting manager to ensure that a proper interface exists between EMS and the agency's cost accounting. Task 9 involves developing a management information subsystem. It consists of designing the procedures needed for data input, processing, and output. Phase 3 consists of all activities required to implement the EMS and ensure continuing successful operation. Implementation tasks include documentation, training, installation and initiation of new procedures, and monitoring of results. Task 10 involves developing procedure manuals. Usually, 2 manuals are provided: an EMS operation manual and a user's manual. Task 11 involves conducting orientation and training workshops. Provisions should be made for initial orientation sessions to familiarize employees with the EMS. Task 12 involves completing an equipment inventory. If the inventory of the agency's vehicles and equipment has not been completed by this time, additional effort should be made to complete it and establish the equipment master file. Task 13 involves determining fleet size requirements and developing a 5-year acquisition plan. Using the new fleet planning and authorization system, annual maintenance work programs should be analyzed to determine equipment resource needs and optimum fleet sizes. Task 14 involves developing an annual equipment work program and budget. The work program and budget should be formally approved and used as the basis for scheduling operations. Task 15 involves identifying and allocating resources. Manpower and resource requirements for equipment maintenance should be determined from the approved work program. Task 16 involves initiating work scheduling and reporting procedures. This task consists of initiating the EMS procedures for weekly scheduling and reporting of equipment maintenance and repair. Task 17 involves initiating parts and supplies management procedures. This task should begin simultaneously with Task 16 to ensure that all parts and supplies ordered and issued under the new EMS will be properly accounted for. Task 18 involves initiating financial management procedures. Under this task, the financial management subsystem will be implemented. This part of the EMS should start simultaneously with tasks 16 and 17 to ensure that all costs are properly captured and accounted for. Task 19 involves initiating MIS procedures. The Equipment Management Information Subsystem should be implemented at the same time as the previous tasks to ensure that information flows will begin in an orderly manner. This task will involve receiving and processing the various reports from the other subsystems and producing management summaries on work status progress in relation to annual plans. Task 20 involves monitoring EMS operations. For the first year after implementation of the EMS, there should be frequent and thorough monitoring of the system. Successful implementation of the equipment management system will require careful planning and scheduling. Although these will not guarantee success, they can facilitate the implementation process. For more information on this or other IRF videotapes, write to the International Road Federation or call the numbers on your screen.